My name is Tomi Suzuki. I am a third year. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. I am a third year associate at Turpinning Law, where we practice white collar criminal defense work. I've been in Charlotte now since 2019. I am happy to see all of you here today, and I would like to give you each a brief moment to introduce yourself. And I think we can start with Erin Taylor. It looks like you are not muted, so if you want to go ahead.
Sure. My name is Erin Taylor. I'm the current president of the Mecklenburg County Bar. I'm also a federal public defender. I've been doing that for almost 15 years.
Thank you. And Mr. Figueroa?
My name is Emilio. I am a third year associate at Marvin Allen. I work on the corporate team, and I've been here for almost 2 years now. And I'm originally from West Palm Beach, Florida, but I moved to Charlotte from Chicago. That's where I went to law school.
Awesome. And Mr. Bowen?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. My name is Sean Bowen. I work at a law firm called McDonald Hopkins, and I'm a data privacy associate.
So I think diving into our first set of questions, and I think if we'll just go in the order in which everyone introduced themselves, why did you decide to go to law school? So starting with you, Ms. Taylor.
That was not my original plan. I was looking at going into more of a science field, more marine biology. And then my brother went to law school. He's 2 years ahead of me. And I decided, well, that might give me some flexibility in when I go for graduate school and deciding where I want to take my career. So it wasn't the plan at all. It was kind of a last minute decision. But here I am, almost 20 years later.
Awesome. And where did you go to law school?
I went to Wake Forest.
Mr. Figueroa, why did you decide to go to law school?
Yes, for me, it was very untraditional. Dream growing up was to be in the NFL. That was not in the plans. So I was majoring in sports management in undergrad, trying to work some way in sports. But I think it was sophomore year, they brought me into the office and they said, start thinking about your career. And I never thought of it. I just thought that you go to school, you get a degree, and you just go home. So if make this short, a few options that I was looking at was to be like an agent or to get an internship or law school. And I was like, oh, well, I never knew about law school. I didn't know any attorneys at the time. So I gave it a shot. And I think it was either going to law school or just getting a job. And I just chose law school because I think I had mentors along the way who were able to help me out.
And where did you go to law school?
I went to Northwestern.
Okay. And you, Mr. Bowen, why did you decide to go to law school?
I was a criminal justice major in undergrad. I originally wanted to maybe do something in law enforcement, but decided to go to law school instead. Reason being, I wanted to be a prosecutor, and I ended up doing that for a few years, working with kids and helping kids in New York City. So that was really the main reason. I really wanted to sort of get into the criminal justice arena. So that was the driving force, and I ended up going to law school at Rutgers in New Jersey.
Awesome. And I guess this is for anyone who would like to answer. What helped you get accepted into law school?
I could start with that. Obviously taking your LSATs. I took a long time to study for the LSAT. I studied that last semester in college. I took a year off from college, to continue studying to get the scores that I wanted. And I would really say that's, what helped me get into law school. There was a bunch of reading materials that I ordered and prepared, and sort of did a lot of self-study. So I would say, studying. That's really the key behind, getting into the law school you want to get into.
How did you choose which law school you would go to?
I can take that one. I kind of used a similar process that I used when I was selecting my undergrad. I kind of had like my safety schools, my kind of, if I make it in, I'm cool with that, and my reach schools. And then as the acceptances started coming in, I had to decide, financially where would make most sense. And so I kind of decided, all right, I got into these law schools. I have scholarships for X law schools, but I don't really have scholarships for other ones. I had an outside scholarship. And I just kind of weighed cost of living with kind of where I would have a good experience. And so I visited some of the law schools that were like my top 3 or 4 choices, and decided kind of like what the vibe was and how I felt being on campus. So the law school visits were really helpful. So I would definitely suggest, if you have a short list, you definitely want to visit all, if not most of those schools on your list. That would make a huge difference.
And I guess just how did you even make the initial inquiry into what law schools you decided to even apply for?
I just wanted out of the New York area.
Okay.
I wanted to be farther away from home. But I just kind of basically I picked kind of geographically where I wanted to be, and I applied to a ton of law schools. So not a ton, but a fair number. And so kind of geographically, I kind of decided based on that, and then just kind of chose, based on that.
And Mr. Figueroa, I think you were jumping
Yes,
in there.
yes, so because it's for the parents. So when your student is applying to law schools, and I didn't know this at the time, when you first take the LSAT, as Sean was mentioning, your score goes into a portal, and I think it's the LSAC who I guess runs everything. But so for me, and also because it's for diversity, there's also fee waivers, because I was able to apply for a fee waiver when you're applying to law schools. But I kind of only applied to the schools that reached out to me, because I guess they saw my scores and they saw that I was a diverse candidate. Because at the end of the day, going to law school is already scary. I didn't really know, I thought going to college was enough. So I think as a first generation student, it was helpful to have the schools reach out to me, and then they had fee waivers. And that's obviously how I went to Northwestern, because the Black student organization reached out to me and encouraged me to apply. And I think, as we all mentioned, I think financial cost is a big key when you're applying to law schools, and also the geographic region where you want to be, but then also think about where you might want to end up working, because that also could play into your law school choice.
Yeah, that's really true, because I went to Tulane, and it was they really marketed it really well to me, and I was like, this is where I want to be. I want to be in New Orleans. So I definitely agree with that. What would you say made law school, or what makes law school difficult? Anyone can answer.
I mean, just the sort of, I don't want to say, maybe the dedication that you need to succeed. That first year is really important. You really got to put the time into studying and learning the materials and reading the books. It's not just you can go to class, look over a few notes and then call it a day. There really is a dedication to, really understanding materials, long nights, lots of studying. I would say that's sort of the biggest challenge, or this was my biggest challenge.
Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it was trying to figure out what my study style was, in high school and undergrad, things for many of us come a lot easier. And so learning how to study for taking one exam at the end of the semester that determines your grade for the class is a totally different sort of thing. And I struggled trying to figure out, well, is outlining good for me, or is something more practical, more like more my speed. And so that probably took me my entire first year to figure out.
Sure.
For me, I think it was just understanding a different type of learning. I think when because I went straight through, I was like, oh, it's like we basically in law school, you read cases and you want to apply the cases, and it's like usually a holding, which is one or two sentences of a new fact pattern. But I would just read these cases and think of them as like stories, and then just kind of talk about the stories on my exams. But that's not what law school was for. It was really to understand the ruling of these cases and then applying it to a new set of facts. So I think, and I didn't know this going in. So just if you know that going in, I think that was a hard thing that I struggled with, is if you go into classes and if you realize why every case you read is important, what's the holding, and then when you're doing your outline and studying, if you could take practice exams too. When you're taking your practice exams, I think it would help you with your legal reasoning.
Were any of you on any journals or participated in moot court?
Yeah, I was on
the
journal.
moot court board and the trial bar board. I was not really into the journals. I really like the trial practice, more courtroom geared stuff. So I was on the moot court board and the trial bar. I got on the moot court board through an internal law school competition, and you had to perform at a certain level in order to be invited onto the board.
And I think Mr. Bowen, you had something to add.
Yeah, I was saying I was on a journal. Usually, in all law schools, they'll have multiple journals. You'll have like the main law school journal, and then they'll have other journals as well. And I just thought, being on a journal was helpful in terms of, improving some of your research and writing skills. So I would definitely encourage it from that standpoint.
And how important are journals and moot court in law school in general?
I think it depends on what your goals are. A lot of law firms look for, both, honestly. Sometimes, they do look for that journal experience to show that, but sometimes it'll show that you're a good writer, or it might show like what type of grades you might have. Certainly if you're looking to go into, a role that's a little more like trial focused or courtroom focused, they're going to want to see that those moot court skills or moot court on your resume. So I think it definitely helps. I think both help really for either.
And do you have to have a high GPA to be on a journal or moot court? Or did you have to have a high GPA to be on journal?
I think just from my experience, for the main law school journal, it was grades based. For all the other journals, it was a writing competition.
Yeah, for me, moot court was, and so was the trial bar board, all through competition.
Okay. Mr. Figueroa, how did you balance being a student and your personal life?
Yes, that was one thing that I had to learn going straight from undergrad to law school, because many of my classmates took work experience before. So I think it was a lot to handle, because your classes are, I guess every law school is different, but you're in like these sections, and classes are, I think, about an hour or so, and you have about 4 to 5 a day. So your class load isn't, I guess, as hectic. But then I think the study load and the workload, you have to be really disciplined. I feel like they say for each credit hour you should times it by 3 for hours you study. And I think you also need to have a balance, because you can't just study 24/7, because then that's not healthy either. So I think it's good to be disciplined, have boundaries. I'm very organized, so I feel like organizing all your classes, but then also setting either like a Saturday or Sunday, like some time for yourself. And the semester, like it's scary, but it goes by fast. I feel like it's like 13 to 14 weeks. It's definitely a grind, but especially your first year semester grades are the most important part of law school. And then after that, it's your entire first year grades, because that's what law firms generally look at. So it's definitely worth the grind.
And Ms. Taylor, how did you balance being a student with your personal life?
My first semester, I don't think I did a good job of that. And then I started thinking back to like the things I really enjoyed. That's kind of like before I went to law school. The school had like an intramural basketball team, and I played basketball through high school and part of college. And so that was something that I could like target as something to do outside of class. And so just trying to find little things like, once or twice a week where I can just have fun and not even think about law school or interact with people in my section. Just kind of take that load off. But yeah, and finding time to sleep.
Sleep's important.
Which I'm not doing a very good job of now, but it's kind of like your anxiety can be really high, especially that first semester. And so you definitely need to kind of find ways to, for parents to encourage your kids to find healthy ways to get that anxious energy out. And that's the one thing is like, you want to make sure like whatever you're doing is a healthy thing. And not, want to start drinking more or anything like that. And that tends to be, something you want to avoid. I know I saw people get addicted to Mountain Dew in the morning. That was not.
Mine was Coke Zero.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that every morning. And people were like, they had to have it. So I would just be mindful of those pitfalls. And just try to find these outlets to kind of get rid of that like negative and anxious energy.
Thank you. And you, Mr. Bowen, how did you balance being a student with your personal life?
I think I would just build off of what Ms. Taylor said, just finding that one thing that you like to do before law school and make sure you're putting time aside to do it. For me, it was just exercise. So whether it be in the morning or after classes, I'll make sure I get some exercise in. And, you want to, I would say you want to like sort of schedule your days. You got classes in the morning, wherever you have them. You want to schedule the times that you're going to study and, make sure you do schedule time for yourself to wind down and get enough sleep.
Yeah, and I think a common thread with what everyone said is kind of really taking the time to find what works for you, and not really, everyone else is so different. And I think when you start comparing yourself in law school to what other people are doing and what their study habits are and what, they're doing for their exercise, you got to really try and focus on what works for you and finding that groove. So I think that's definitely important. What kind of classmates did you have in law school?
You want to keep it real answer?
A mix.
So you can't, like, every class is going to be different. Every year of law school is going to be different. So this is my experience. My classmates spent most of the first semester just sizing me up. There were only 4 students of color in my section. And
Wow.
so that created some challenges. And, people would, purposely exclude you from things, or, if they see that you're doing well, all of a sudden, are you answering questions in class in a way that they couldn't, they're like, oh, all of a sudden you're on their radar. And so that was my experience in my first year. Things got dramatically better after my first year. And when I was taking more elective classes and, things were more flexible. But my first year was a very competitive class. And that created some challenges in terms of kind of, making connections with people. I ended up having to connect with 2 L's and 3 L's, not so much people in my section, unfortunately.
That is unfortunate. I know for me, I went to law school directly out of undergrad. And so I was kind of surprised with the I guess, diversity in age of the students that were there? Just the different, and when I say age, I just mean people who had been working for some time or who had otherwise had professional experience in the law field, and I had none. And I was wondering, was that a similar experience that you all had?
Yeah, I would say I had an experience like that as well, especially in Rutgers had an evening program too. So in the evening program tend to be older students as well. But I think, just in like the day track, most folks range from, 21 to maybe 30. So that was definitely there for me as well. And I will say in terms of, the other students as well, at least at Rutgers, like our class body was very diverse. So we had a pretty good mix of people from all different races, colors, wherever. I don't know if other law schools do this too, but Rutgers also has a minority student program that you can apply for before you're accepted or before, during the application process. And, they sort of like have like different activities, for anyone who applies, and you can sort of, there's a group of people you can reach out to and sort of bond with. And that was something that was really unique to Rutgers.
Awesome.
And this is Judy. I'm your chat moderator. I was just going to jump in here for any parents who watch this video. All of the law schools have to report their diversity statistics. So you can look up sort of the history of the school and the classes and see what the classes look like.
Yeah. Thank you. My next question is about what time management skills do you recommend that worked for you? And I guess we'll start with Mr. Figueroa.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, being organized, I think, and just knowing your class schedule and then setting a time, like it doesn't have to be like the 3 hours of studying for 1 credit hour, but whatever works for you, of like blocking time, like in your evenings or whenever it works, mornings, just to focus on studying. And if like for me, sometimes it's hard to focus 3 hours straight. Like you could do maybe an hour and a half, go get like some food, and then come back and do an hour and a half. But I think just setting that time aside, because like it'll sound painful, but it's only for the 13 or 14 weeks, but it will definitely pay off. And I think just not having a study group is good, but then like while you're in classes, just try not to compare yourself to other people. And I know it's like we all say we won't, but it's very difficult too. But just try your best not to, because at the end of the day, you're doing your best, and that's like all that's going to happen, and it'll pay off.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
I'm probably the example of what not to do. My time management skills didn't kick in until I was studying for the bar exam. and honestly, that actually I was probably the most productive, and so my mind was the clearest during that period of time where I was so regimented, where I would study for an hour, take a break for 15, 20 minutes and get right back to it for a period of time, and then just shut it down for the end of the day. So I'm the example of what not to do. I pulled several all-nighters in law school. I had access to the mock courtroom because I was doing the audio visual as my work study to get some extra cash. And so me and a couple of friends, we would hang out on the bench and knock out our work at night when no one would bother us or could find us. So I'm the example of what not to do. I learned later, I'm much better at it now, but in hindsight, I could have done a much better job. So that's something for parents, when you're talking to your children, that's something you want to kind of hammer home, is hey, you really have to kind of start to hone in on these skills earlier as opposed to later, because that was not a pleasant experience pulling all-nighters, especially my 2L year. It was pretty bad.
Yeah, you would not wanted to see me leading up to my constitutional law final. It was not a good look. Mr. Bowen, what about you? What time management skills did you recommend that worked for you?
Just to echo what Emilio said, just blocking out that time, go to the library, your law school have them go to the library, find a study room that you like, and use that study room the entire semester, right? Make sure you're reserving it, block off that time, whether it's 3 hours, 4 hours, and, really discipline yourself to just sit in that room and study, right? That's what I did. That's what I would recommend. Study groups can be helpful every, maybe not every time you study, a few times maybe throughout the week to compare notes with people you trust. But yeah, I would recommend, just finding that space where you can sit down in 3 to 4 hours comfortably and just really study.
Is there any thing you wish you had known before going to law school?
Time management.
Time management, yeah.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think that like for these parents here, and if your student is still maybe in like undergrad, he could try some of these, like booking a study room and reserving time like in their senior year of college just to prepare them, because I don't think it's not a bad idea to start this stuff and say, even if they end up not going to law school, these are good skills to have for any career. So I wish I would have known a lot of these things earlier, because I was definitely not one of the best law students until I realized this stuff later on.
I also just add one more quick thing, just look
Yeah.
for pre-law programs. Like I did the Thurgood Marshall Clio program, and that was like a 6-week intensive like summer program to kind of help you get prepared for law school. So try or see if you want to go to law school. And so there's several of these programs out here. Some are more intensive than others, but certainly thankfully I knew about it, but not everyone does. That's something to look out for. And some law schools also kind of have a pre-law sort of transitional program as well. So certainly look out for those programs.
And I would just add at the end, just really quick, I would encourage parents to think about the ways that their child is going to pay for law school before they go. One of the ways that worked for me, I ended up joining the National Guard in Jersey, where I went to law school, and my tuition was paid for. So I know a lot of states sort of have that, like a lot of state National Guards sort of have that program. So I know the military is not an option for everyone, but that is an option, and they, your students should consider all kinds of options to pay for law school.
Well, thank you for your service. That's a really good piece of advice.
Thank you.
Ms. Taylor, I think earlier you were describing that it was your experience in law school was one that you were one of 4 people, I think that you said, of color. And could you just describe for us your experience as one of 4 people of color in law school?
Certainly. I can say it was pretty isolating, because it was that plus me being from New York City and being in the South. And so I kind of had like a double whammy, I'm kind of out of my comfort zone, being, in North Carolina versus New York. And so what I ended up doing was, thankfully, I joined BALSA right away. I'm the Black Law Students Association, and it was primarily obviously of, 2Ls and 3Ls, and started creating kind of my network and kind of having like a little base of people I could turn to whenever I was kind of struggling. There were also a couple of professors. That's another third thing. There were some professors that open door policies, and there were a few professors of color who I was able to reach out to because they were aware of, for some reason, our class just had like no students of color. And they had open doors and allowed me to come in and just kind of vent. And so those are things I would certainly suggest and looking for, like joining committees or organizations with similar interests in people, and also looking for professors who have that open door policy, who will kind of give you that space to kind of vent and kind of help you navigate through, your law school career.
Thank you. What was your favorite internship and how did you get it?
Well, I think
Anyone?
so. Yeah, when you're in law school, in the summers, usually from like May to like July, a lot of like 1Ls, first year law students are called 1Ls. The end of their summer, they will get internships, and there's like public service internships There's a few law firm internships, but mainly the 1L internships are catered to diversity. So I think all of your students should be keeping an eye on that's potential at the end of their first year summer, and then traditionally most law students work at the end of their 2L summer. But for me, my most exciting internship was when I got back. So my second, it's called 2L year, but I call it second year. I was at a sports marketing firm. One of their counsel left to work at a startup. So it was just like 20 hours a week. I was just a legal intern working on a lot of corporate transactional documents, but I think it was super exciting. And I think I only got it because I was part of like the sports entertainment law group, which was very small. So I feel like just being plugged into those groups, there's a variety of groups at your law school, like student groups. And I think internships, that's how you could even probably find some of your summer internships. Because a lot of it is posted online, but that's mainly the bigger firms. I think you might have to look in for other internships, and they're all experienced. They all are helpful on your resume, and I think it helps you become a better lawyer.
Thank you. I think we're getting close. This might be my last question for you guys. And it is, what advice would you give to your high school or college self? And we can start with you, Mr. Figueroa. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes. I think, I'll be short. I think be more disciplined. Realize that it all really starts from undergrad. So your GPA from college, your LSAT score, is like that. All that stuff matters. So take it very seriously. And I think just being more disciplined, realizing that I thought law school was going to be like 20 years, but it flew by so fast, and it's definitely going to be worth it in the end.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what was just said, and time does fly. So certainly try to do your best to enjoy that experience. And most importantly, it is totally okay to be yourself. It's really kind of easy to kind of feel like you have to fit inside of a certain mold, especially if you're in a law school and they kind of have a certain reputation for the types of students that they have. My thing was, I worked really hard to try to be myself in whatever space I was in that law school. And that served me well in my career as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Bowen?
As high school students going into college, I would be mindful of what your major is. If you know at that point you want to go to law school, some law schools have hard GPA cutoffs. If you want to be a science major, engineering or something like that, just it's harder to get a high GPA in that type of major as opposed to a liberal arts major, right? So just know, be mindful of that going into college if you know you want to go to law school, and that's my piece of advice.
Yeah, and like something like if you want to be a patent lawyer, maybe make sure that you're getting a science degree.
Exactly.
Well, thank you all so much for your time today, and thank you for the time that you spent during the session. It was very insightful and informative. And at this time, we will ask everyone to leave the session and head back to the event dashboard and re-enter the main stage for the next portion of the program. And if you need any assistance, just click the Ask for Help button. It was great meeting you all, and thank you. And I will see you in the next session.